It is a universally frustrating experience to walk into a store, look at a piece of candy that you vividly remember costing a single penny, and you see a price tag for like 25 cents.
Yeah, that is the worst.
It really is. I mean, it's one of those moments that makes you feel instantly old, but more than that, it feels like a glitch in the matrix. You find yourself wondering, did the candy get 25 times better? Or is something fundamentally broken about the penny in your pocket?
Well, that feeling of a glitch is exactly what we are diagnosing today. When the math of our everyday lives just stops making sense, it usually points to a much deeper structural shift that most of us, we never really see happening.
Exactly. So today we are looking at a book called The Magic Coin by Jonathan Newman, which is published by the Mises Institute.
Hmm.
And on its surface, this looks like a beautifully illustrated children's story about a young girl named Lily and a magical floating coin named Newton.
Right, but do not let the colorful pictures fool you.
No, definitely not. This book is essentially a Trojan horse for some deeply layered economic theory. I mean, it is a kid-friendly adaptation of Murray Rothbard's 1963 classic, What Has Government Done to Our Money?
Yeah, it takes the heavy academic concepts of the Austrian School of Economics and sort of distills them into a time travel adventure, but the underlying mechanics it exposes are completely geared toward adults who are just trying to understand modern finance.
Right. So our mission for this deep dive is to follow Lily and Newton on that adventure, to explore the history, the evolution, and ultimately the devolution of money. But before we get too deep, just a really important note for you listening.
Yeah, we should definitely clarify this.
Right. So this source material presents a very specific, highly critical view of government intervention in central banking. We are not taking sides here. We are not endorsing these political or economic viewpoints.
Exactly. We're just analyzing the text.
Yep. Our job is simply to act as your guides, to help you unpack the fascinating arguments and the historical perspective presented in this specific text.
And to understand any complex argument, you really have to look at its foundation. The book spends its early chapters establishing a baseline Austrian premise, which is that money is not a state decree.
Right.
It wasn't invented by a king or a government. It's actually a spontaneous social technology.
And the book illustrates this by dropping Lily onto a beach with Robinson Crusoe, who completely ignores a silver coin because, well, he has no one to trade.
It's all alone, yeah.
Exactly. Then it moves to a primitive village to show us the double coincidence of wants. You have a woman named Abigail who has eggs but wants clothes. A man named Joshua has shoes but wants eggs. And someone else has clothes but wants shoes.
It's the classic barter gridlock.
Right. Barter sounds great until you realize it's like trying to trade your web design skills directly for a root canal.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the timing and the specific needs almost never line up perfectly. So how does Abigail actually solve this?
Well, we all know barter is inefficient, but Rothbard uses this elementary setup to prove a non-negotiable point in Austrian economics, which is that money must originate as a useful commodity first. The friction of barter is what forces innovation.
Okay, so what does Abigail do?
Abigail eventually accepts Joshua's shoes, not to wear them, but specifically to trade them for the clothes she actually wants. This is the birth of the medium of exchange.
It's a brilliant conceptual workaround. But, I mean, it creates a massive physical problem. Carrying around a basket of shoes to buy groceries is exhausting.
Right, very impractical.
Yeah, plus you can't exactly chop the heel off a shoe to buy a single piece of candy. So how does this society transition from bulky goods to, like, convenient currency?
So societies naturally gravitate toward goods that are durable, portable, easily divisible, and universally valued. And historically, humanity almost unanimously agreed on precious metals, primarily gold and silver.
Makes sense.
But holding heavy metal is still risky and cumbersome. So the market provides a solution, which is the goldsmiths.
Right, and Lily sees this in 17th century London. People deposit their physical gold with secure goldsmiths, and in return, they get a paper receipt. It basically says, this piece of paper entitles the bearer to retrieve 1 ounce of gold from my vault at any time.
And because paper is infinitely lighter and easier to transact with, people just start trading the paper receipts instead of dragging gold out of the vault every single time.
Yeah, that sounds super convenient.
It is. And as long as the goldsmith acts as a 100% reserve bank, meaning holding exactly 1 ounce of gold for every paper receipt in circulation, the system works beautifully. The paper is just a perfectly backed substitute for the real money.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the book argues this safe, convenient system is where the original sin of modern banking actually occurs. Newton the Coin calls it profitable hanky-panky.
Yeah, profitable hanky-panky. Because the goldsmiths are sitting on literal piles of gold and they notice a behavioral pattern. The paper is circulating in the market, meaning the depositors rarely come in to redeem their receipts all at once. The vault is always full. So the goldsmith has this dangerous realization. They can print extra paper receipts, receipts that have absolutely zero gold backing them in the vault, and lend those out to people, charging interest.
See, I'm hung up on this part. Giving out a receipt for gold you actually hold makes total sense. But when they start writing fake receipts and loaning them out, isn't that just blatant fraud? I mean, why would the market immediately reject that or arrest the goldsmiths?
That is the core Austrian critique. In any other industry, selling title to property you do not own is criminal fraud. If I sell you a title to a car that doesn't exist, I go to jail.
Exactly.
But in banking, a legal precedent was set that allowed this practice to become institutionalized. It's called fractional reserve banking. The bank only holds a fraction of the reserves necessary to cover all the paper it has issued.
But how do these fake receipts survive in the wild without people noticing? Like, why doesn't anyone catch on?
Because of fungibility. The fake receipt looks completely identical to the real receipt. The goldsmith loans it out. The borrower spends it the baker, and the baker accepts it, completely believing it represents a real ounce of gold in the vault.
Oh, wow.
Right. Suddenly, you have two different people holding two different pieces of paper, both believing they possess the exact same physical ounce of gold. This artificially expands the money supply.
And it leaves the bank incredibly fragile, which leads to the terrifying scenario Lily witnesses next, which is a bank run. Rumors spread that the goldsmith has been printing two-name receipts, panic sets in, everyone rushes to the vault at the exact same time to demand their gold.
Which they don't have.
Right. The first few people in line get their medal, and everyone else is left holding totally worthless paper.
And in a truly free market, the fear of a bank run acts as a natural immune system. It keeps banks honest. If a bank prints too many unbacked receipts, their competitors or their customers will call their bluff, demand the gold, and bankrupt them.
But the logical problem here is that bankers didn't like this natural immune system.
Oh.
I mean, they didn't want to go back to honest, 100% reserve banking. They wanted the profits of the hanky-panky without the consequences of the bank runs.
What's fascinating here is how the text frames the solution to that problem. Lily is transported into a dark, wood-paneled conference room where bankers and politicians are plotting.
The dark room.
Yeah, the dark room. And they aren't trying to fix the gold shortage. They are meeting to change the rules of the game entirely by creating a central bank.
So according to Rothbard, a central bank essentially cartelizes the banking system. It becomes a bank for the banks, backed by the legal force of the government.
Exactly. The central bank removes the free market check on inflation. If all the banks in the cartel agree to expand their pseudo-receipts at the exact same time, they won't drain each other's gold reserves.
And if the public gets suspicious and starts a bank run anyway?
Then the central bank steps in as the lender of last resort and bails the troubled bank out.
And where does the central bank get the money for the bailout? They just print it out of thin air. This is where the children's story drops the fairy tale aesthetics and slams right into real hard history. The book includes a section specifically anchoring this darkroom concept to August 15, 1971.
The Nixon shock. To really understand the gravity of that date, we have to look at the mechanics of the Bretton Woods system established after World War II.
Right.
Under that agreement, the global financial system was tied to the U.S. dollar, and the U.S. dollar was tied to gold. The U.S. government explicitly promised foreign central banks that they could exchange 35 U.S. dollars for 1 physical ounce of gold.
It sounds like a giant international game of musical chairs. The U.S. promised everyone a chair, an ounce of gold for their $35. But throughout the 1960s, the U.S. government was spending staggering amounts of money to fund the Vietnam War and the Great Society Social Program.
Massive spending.
Instead of raising taxes to pay for it all, they just kept inviting more and more paper dollars to the party.
That is a perfect analogy. They printed massive amounts of unbacked currency to cover their deficits. Eventually, foreign nations looked at the math and realized the music was about to stop. The U.S. had vastly more paper dollars circulating globally than they had gold in Fort Knox.
So countries like France essentially called the bluff. They started stopping the music, handing over their paper dollars, and demanding their chairs. They started draining the U.S. gold reserves.
Yeah, and by 1971, the gold window was closing fast. It was the geopolitical equivalent of the bank run Lilly saw in London. Facing total default, President Richard Nixon went on television and unilaterally severed the tie between the dollar and gold.
Wow.
He claimed he was doing it temporarily to protect the dollar from international money speculators.
But the text points the finger directly at the state. The government spent beyond its means, printed pseudo-receipts, and broke its fundamental promise. Once that tie to gold was severed, the era of fiat money truly began. The government and the central bank could now create unlimited currency backed by absolutely nothing but their own decree. So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Like, why should you care about a policy shift from the 1970s?
Well, because of the hidden cost. Newton the Coin explains this beautifully to Lilly. Nobody likes paying taxes. If the government sends you a direct bill for $10,000 to fund a foreign war, you are going to vote them out of office immediately.
Absolutely.
But with a central bank, the government doesn't have to send you a bill. They can sneakily tax you through inflation.
So break down the mechanics of how that hidden tax actually works.
Okay, so when the central bank creates new money out of thin air to buy government debt, that new money doesn't represent any new goods or services in the economy. It just increases the total pool of currency bidding on the exact same amount of stuff.
So it dilutes the value of every single dollar already sitting in your wallet in your savings account.
Exactly. You don't see a literal tax deduction on your paycheck, but you absolutely pay for that government spending when your groceries suddenly cost 20% more, or when you can't afford to buy a house. The government extracted purchasing power from your savings and transferred it to themselves.
Which brings us back to the candy going from 1 penny to 25 cents. It didn't get 25 times better. The currency just got weaker. And this brings us to the most terrifying part of Lilly's journey.
Yeah, this part is intense.
Because if a central bank can print unlimited money to fund unlimited government spending, what is the ultimate endgame of that system?
The endgame is total monetary chaos.
Yeah, Lilly is transported to a modern street outside a grocery store, and there are long lines of desperate people. She watches a woman roll up with a literal wheelbarrow full of cash. A thief runs up, shoves the woman aside, and steals the wheelbarrow. But the crazy part is, the thief dumps all the cash out onto the street before running away with the empty cart.
Because the paper itself has lost all use value. The physical wheelbarrow is the only thing worth stealing.
That's insane.
The book is illustrating hyperinflation, and this exact scenario is not fiction. It played out precisely like this in reality during the Weimar Republic in Germany in the early 1920s.
Right, people were sweeping cash into the gutters. They were burning stacks of currency in their fireplaces because the paper was cheaper than actually buying firewood.
Murray Rothbard termed this terminal stage the crack-up boom. It is crucial to understand that hyperinflation isn't just a mathematical problem of printing too much money. It is a psychological tipping point.
So walk us through the mechanics of that psychology.
Yeah.
How does a society cross the line from normal inflation to a crack-up boom?
Well, in the early stages of inflation, the government prints money and prices rise. But the public generally believes the price increases are temporary. They think, things are expensive right now. I'll hold on to my money and wait for prices to come back down.
Right, which makes sense.
And by holding the money, they actually keep the currency somewhat stable.
But eventually the public wakes up.
Exactly. The public realizes the printing is never going to stop and prices are never going back down. That is the tipping point. The psychological expectation shifts from money will hold its value to this money is melting like an ice cube.
It turns the entire economy into a massive, frantic game of hot potato. But the potato is your life savings.
Right?
The moment you get paid, you run to the store to buy absolutely anything. Canned goods, a random chair, shoes you don't even need. You just have to get rid of the paper money before it loses even more value.
The velocity of money skyrockets because everyone is dumping the currency simultaneously. The demand for holding cash plummets to absolute zero while the supply is shooting to infinity.
Wow.
Merchants have to add zeros to their price tags by the minute just to keep up. Production eventually grinds to a halt because the foundational tool of trade, the medium of exchange, has completely disintegrated.
And how do you fix a mess like that? According to Newton, you can't just tweak interest rates or pass a new banking regulation. The only fix is incredibly painful. You have to completely abandon the hyperinflated money and start over from scratch with a new currency that has strict, unbreakable physical limits on how much can be created.
It requires a total economic reset. And this sobering reality brings Lily's journey to a close. She finds herself right back where she started, standing on the sidewalk outside her modern-day candy store. Newton shrinks back down into a normal-looking silver coin in her hand.
But for the first time, Lily flips the coin over and looks at the back. Engraved in the silver is a picture of a balanced scale.
That scale is the visual synthesis of the entire Austrian philosophy presented in the book. On a literal historical level, the scale represents weight. Sound money, whether it was gold or silver, was based on actual physical weight and scarcity.
Right, because you cannot print an ounce of gold into existence.
Exactly. When banks and governments introduce unbacked paper into the system, they are tipping the scale and artificially diluting the currency.
But on a deeper level, the text argues that the scale represents justice. Think back to why humanity invented money in the first place, with Abigail and Joshua in the primitive village. Money was invented to help individuals cooperate, divide labor, and trade honestly with one another.
Yeah, trade honestly.
The book suggests that the chaos of our modern financial system stems entirely from trickery. The goldsmiths tricking people into thinking their deposits were safe, and governments tricking the public into using fiat paper backed by nothing.
The ultimate takeaway of this perspective is that a just, honest money must originate from the free market, chosen voluntarily by the people using it. It doesn't necessarily have to be gold or silver. It could be Bitcoin, or theoretically, it could even be shoes, if that is what the market spontaneously determined was best.
Right.
The core argument is simply that the market should dictate the money supply, not a government printing press or a central banking cartel.
It's a really powerful shift in perspective, and Lily actually puts this into practice in a charming way at the end of the story. She only has her penny, and she knows she isn't going to spend her magical silver souvenir coin. So she walks into the store, looks the owner dead in the eye, and asks, "How much candy can I get for a shoe?"
It completely throws the store owner off guard.
He is totally bewildered.
Yeah.
But then he just laughs and hands her a free lollipop. It's a sweet, lighthearted ending to some incredibly heavy macroeconomic theory. But it is a theory that impacts every single one of us, every single day.
Because the next time you are at the grocery store or the gas station and you see that prices have jumped yet again, you now have a new lens through which to view that receipt.
Maybe the eggs and the candy didn't actually get more expensive to produce. Maybe the money you're using to buy them just got less valuable because of the invisible tax of inflation. It forces you to question the foundation of the very currency you spend your life working so hard to earn.
It absolutely does.
But it also leaves us with a massive, looming question. Something for you to chew on long after you take your headphones off. This book strongly advocates for society to reject state-backed fiat money and return to a purely market-chosen currency.
Right, a total shift.
But if we were to actually do that tomorrow, if we just flipped a switch, ended the central banking system, and refused to use government money, how would we survive that transition? Wouldn't the sudden, massive shock of abandoning the currency our entire global supply chain runs on trigger the exact same chaotic crack-up boom that this economic theory is trying to save us from?
It is the ultimate paradox of sound money reform. The cure might temporarily look exactly like the disease.
Something to ponder the next time you fish a quarter out of your pocket.